Whoopsh. Good evening, everybody. Live here from Prince William County, Virginia. It's your guy, the Silver Fox, Mark Archambault, United States Marine Corps retired. Blessed to have you guys here tonight joining us. Before we get started with this evening's guest, I just wanted to do a quick pitch to everybody for the podcast. Remember, all proceeds are donated to the Amphibious Tractor Memorial. It costs you nothing to subscribe. If you like the content, please like it, subscribe, help out with the algorithms, all those good things. Remember, every cent goes over there to that worthy effort. All right, we are done with the housekeeping notes because I got a great dude on the other side of me over here, and I want to get right into his story. So the wave tops for him, he was a F-18 fighter pilot in the United States Navy, went through all the training pipeline, and then, he's newer to the aircraft and unfortunately had a mishap happen in flight where the plane nosedove, downward spiral, almost crashed in the ocean, but about 3 seconds before, unfortunately, he would have succumbed his life. He ejected out of the cockpit at 695 miles per hour and sustained just the most horrific injuries that anybody would ever want to experience. I'm going to let him share the details of that. But I think the best part about this is that his journey of recovery, his inspiration, and he continues, to pay forward, his story and his wisdom to people, to make them better with their own lives. That's how he's here. My guy, Kegan Gill, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah. And I met Kegan through Fox 5 News up here in Washington, D.C., where he made a news appearance. And I was like, this is a cool friggin' dude. Super down to earth, helpful. I was like, I got to reach out to this guy. So grateful for you joining and spend some time with me and the viewers tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
All right, man. Tell everybody a little bit about your background and like where you're from and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I was born in Oklahoma. I don't remember much of it. When I was at a young age, moved to Colorado. Some of my earliest memories are growing up out in the Rocky Mountains, out in the snow. My dad was like a backcountry outdoorsman. He'd throw me in his little backpack and I'd just go along for a ride out into the San Luis Valley, up into the mountains. And I remember that crystal white snow as a little kid and bombing down the mountains. And by the time I was about 5 or 6, I was blasting down just about anything that anybody else could ski. I was skiing. And so I always had this sort of need for speed and adventure and the outdoors and the blue skies kind of ingrained at me at a real young age. And when I was still pretty young, my family moved to northern Michigan, and that's kind of where I largely call home, Traverse City, Michigan. Grew up there, just kind of a wild kid. I belonged outside, climbing trees, camping, hunting, fishing, just being a kid and going in the classroom and, having to fill out Scantron sheets was not my calling. Being stuck under fluorescent lighting, filling out paperwork at a desk was not what I was meant to do. And so I kind of grinded it out through high school. I was a good athlete. I did well enough in school, even though I didn't like it. But when I graduated, there's a little flight program at the community college where I grew up in Traverse City called Northwestern Michigan College. And it was something I got a flight when I was about 10 years old in a little Cessna, and it always stuck with me. And so I decided to start trying out the flight program and see where it took me. And a few years later, I was a certified flight instructor, finished my college degree, spent a year as a corporate pilot. And then I had a buddy who was applying to go to Navy OCS to be officer candidate school to be a pilot. And I was at the time, I was like, you're going to go be a pilot? Like, don't you have to go to the Naval Academy and your dad's got to be an admiral? Like, I just didn't know anything. And I never thought like a scrappy kid from community college like me was ever going to be able to be a fighter pilot. But he set me straight. He said, no, all you got to do is have a 4-year degree and you can apply. And so I did. And next thing I knew, I was at Navy officer candidate school getting my ass kicked by some Marine drill instructors, just tearing us apart.
Let's go.
So I got a warm spot in my heart for the Marines for sure. Especially their dark sense of humor. Half the time, the hardest thing was just not laughing at the shit they were giving you. But made it through that. And next thing I knew, I was in the aviation training pipeline for the Navy. And from there, kind of my dream came true. And after a few years, I found myself walking out to a Super Hornet and strapping into one of the most incredible freaking flying machines that's ever been built. And it was kind of a dream come true.
Kegan, you still with me?
Yeah, I got you loud and clear. How me?
Yep, same. Hey, apologize to the viewers out there. We had a little technical glitch. The way we left off was you talking about going OCS, getting your ass kicked by Marine drill instructors.
Yeah. So got my ass kicked by the Marine drill instructors. The hardest thing was trying not to laugh at half the stuff they were saying as they tore you apart and beat your ass. But I loved it. I kind of I was signing up for that, and I knew that's what was going to be part of it. But pretty soon after, I found myself in the aviation training pipeline and went through all the flight school, from the ground school, primary flight training, intermediate, advanced, and all along the way continued selecting and getting the good enough grades so I could select jets. And after about 3 years of naval flight training, I graduated from the F-18 training syllabus. I was a winged aviator and headed to my first fleet squadron, and it was a dream come true.
Yeah. So you get through your flight school. I did want to ask you, because you talked about, I was a Marine drill instructor, by the way. So
Nice.
I've told you that during warm-ups.
That's got to be a fun job.
Yeah, man. It was. It's a whole nother topic that would take us hours to unpack, but it was rewarding. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. It was hard but rewarding. But when you mentioned hazing, I was like, oh, I got to ask him this. And, and we've seen how Marines, with the jump wings and stuff and all the crazy things that they do. Did you get your wings like pinned on you?
Yeah. I mean,
talk about it.
So when we wing, you're not supposed to do what's called blood winging, where all your buddies come and punch it into your chest while you're wearing your white uniform. But of course, that just made us want to do it more. So, after they pin those things on your chest, you're just so proud because you've been working at this for years and it's been the hardest thing you've ever done. And now finally you're a legitimate naval aviator and you get to wear these wings of gold. And so part of it's your buddies come and punch that thing into your chest. And, partway through the night, you got blood running down your chest on your white uniform. But you're just so proud of it.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun for us. We didn't make people do that if they're like, no, I don't want to, no one was forced to do it, but most of us wanted to.
Yeah, no, same thing. We used to do like the gauntlet when you get promoted to NCO and stuff. And again, it's all fun and games until people get hurt.
Yeah.
Like I said, it wasn't a big problem until, you get a Marine, sergeant holding, the brand new corporal off the third deck, at Okinawa. And unfortunately, he gets dropped in his head. It's not a problem until, the guy gets medically discharged, for a broken femur. So
yeah, well, that's some next level hazing,
Next level stupidity, right? All right, man. So we'll get back on topic. So going through flight school is one thing. You get your wings and you're excited about it. But then from what I understand, serving around, pilots during my time, is that's almost kind of the easy part. The hard part is actually getting certified on the aircraft that you unit. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, flight school is challenging the whole way through. You're constantly getting pushed, you're getting prodded and tested, and every day you're kind of under the gun of pressure of, if you don't perform, that could be the end of your career, or you might end up down a pipeline that you don't want. And so it's difficult the whole way through, but definitely the last section where you're training in the F-18 itself and what's called the RAG, or the Fleet Replacement Squadron, FRS, that was by far the most challenging part for me. It's just, drinking from a fire hose of knowledge every day. You're just scrambling to try to keep up. And there's some really smart dudes and gals going through that program that, photographic memories and people that have this ability to read all these different documents and publications and compile that into their brain and then just go out and execute it perfectly the first time or close to perfect. I was not that. I was the guy who just had to bust my ass and work really hard and study extra hours and make it happen. But I made it through that pipeline and came out the other end after a year as a naval strike fighter pilot, and headed to VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs in Virginia Beach, where then I found out again, like, as you kind of go through this training pipeline, you think you made it, like, oh, I got my wings, now I'm a real pilot. Then you go through the F-18 training syllabus and you're like, I don't know anything. And you get to the end, you're like, all right, I got to have some knowledge. And then you show up at your first fleet squadron and it's, again, you don't know anything. You're just a little baby in that world. There's just so much to know, and it's so complex and constantly evolving. But I was stoked to be there.
Yeah. Before we get into, your the tragic, incident that you had happened to you, I think it's important because I think a lot of times we Monday morning quarterback things that we see on television, like how can that happen? How did that happen? How did the pilot not this? Can you talk a little bit about what it's like to be behind the sticks of an F-18 and go how fast you're going and how split second that everything is? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, as you're going through all this training, what you're really doing is you're training your brain to operate at this high pace, and you're multitasking because you're not only flying an aircraft, talking on the radios, flying formation, operating weapon systems, defensive systems, an advanced computer system, navigation. There's so many things that you are multitasking and scanning. And so that process, civilian aviation is difficult as it is, just flying from point A to point B. But once you get into the strike fighter aircraft, now you're adding all these tactical things, all these different skill sets. And in the Super Hornet, you're the jack of all trades, master of none, because you have to know how to do a little bit of everything, because that's kind of the role of the Super Hornet, is to be able to launch off an aircraft carrier and be able to take on whatever mission. And we may not be the best at every single one of them, but we're capable. And so as a pilot, it can be incredibly overwhelming and difficult. And even for seasoned guys, it's a high stakes job. And especially once you get out there fighting the jet and doing air combat maneuvering and air to air tactics or close air support in a high threat scenario and things like that. I mean, a lot can go wrong very quickly. And that's kind of what happened to me. It was a high pace dogfight and a lot going on, managing all these systems, playing 4-dimensional chess at the speed of sound. And you're under extreme physical duress as well, because your body now weighs 7.5 times its normal weight. Just a head and helmet that weighs 20 pounds on the ground. Now, when you're under 7.5 G's, that's like having a 150-pound person on your head. And you're looking around, you're thinking, you're flying the aircraft, you're doing things, you're breathing. It's a lot, and it can be overwhelming. Also, it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
It was the most fun that I ever had in the jet, was getting to fight it and do these complex, difficult things. And that's really what I signed up for, was because it was a challenge and because it's difficult. And that's what I think the people in those kind of communities, that's what we thrive on, is that challenge.
That's phenomenal insight. I've never really heard anybody break it down kind of like inside the cockpit and all those factors that are weighing in and the speed that you're doing stuff. And this is a perfect segue to, and I know that sometimes, it can be, hard to talk about these things. I know you're more comfortable about it now, but
yeah,
when I understand you're fighting your commanding officer out on the waters, out outside the Virginia Beach area.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing maneuvers and everything, and you're getting ready to almost come back, and you guys had one more maneuver to do, and then unfortunately walk everybody through it.
Yeah, so we were out practicing air combat maneuvering, or basic fighter maneuvering, which is what people probably commonly refer to as dogfighting. So 2 or more aircraft within visual range of one another trying to shoot each other down. In this case, for pretend, and while this was a training mission, the training that we do is as close to the real thing as possible. So other than actually hosing real missiles off our jets or firing real guns at one another, almost everything else was very, very close to the real thing. So it's very dynamic. You're still maneuvering the jet just like you would in a real fight. You're still feeling all the G's. So, in the world of tactical aviation, you're really out. You're doing your real mission even when you're on a training mission. It's not like you're in a pretend environment. It's very real and very dangerous, even in a training scenario. And so this flight was a perfect case of that. I'm out there. I'd been in my first fleet squadron for about 8 months. So I'm still a relatively new fighter pilot in that world, despite having 3.5 years of flight training and flight school and the RAG, and then now another 8 months in a fleet squadron. I'm still, a pretty new guy to develop the skill that you need to operate really proficiently. But we did several rounds of fighting for that day, and we got to Joker fuel, meaning we had just enough fuel left to knock out one more set of this fighting. So you kind of fight until there's a clear winner and loser, then you set up again and you do it again. And so this was the last dogfight of the day as we're kind of heading back from the area. We're about 50 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, Virginia, in the Whiskey 72 airspace over the Atlantic Ocean. It was a cold January day. We had 37-degree Fahrenheit water temperatures out in the airspace we were operating in below us. The air temperature was below freezing with winds, churned up ocean swell. There was even a great white shark out in my area that my buddy was joking about before we took off, because he was using the shark tracker app on his phone to show all these GPS tag sharks. And we were joking, this would be a terrible day to eject. There's a 3,500-pound, 16-foot great white shark named Mary Lee directly under your airspace. You got freezing water temps, nearly freezing water temps, below freezing air temps, and the water's all churned up.
Wow.
About an hour after that conversation, we're in this fight. I maneuvered the aircraft into a dive at a high airspeed. And as this aircraft came bullseye nose low, pointed straight at the ocean, a computer system on it overrode my control input to protect it from what it thought were bombs on the wings that weren't actually there. And so it would be like going around a sharp corner in a sports car and then having your steering wheel kick back halfway. Only instead of skidding off the road, I'm now stuck in a dive at the ocean. This all just happens in a few seconds. I hear my radar altimeter going off, letting me know I just busted through the hard deck that we set at 5,000 feet above the ocean for safety. And unfortunately, this jet just stopped turning. And I went from that 7.5 G pull. I could feel the weight of my head and my helmet and my body. And I'm breathing to try to force the blood into my head. And I'm straining. And all of a sudden, I just feel that ease up. And it's the worst feeling in my stomach. I just sinks, because now I'm just pointed at the ocean in a jet that is no longer responsive to my command, an out of control aircraft. I'm pulling the stick into my lap. Very quickly, that radar altimeter goes off. I pulled the throttles to idle, put out the speed brake in a desperate attempt to slow down, but it was too little too late. In the HUD and in my helmet display, I'm getting an upward arrow and it's saying, pull up, pull up. I already am pulling up as much as I can. And very quickly, the canopy is just getting filled up with the ground rush of the ocean as it rapidly approaches the cockpit. And 2 seconds before impacting the ocean, traveling at 695 miles per hour, I was in a 51-degree nose low dive, so a very steep dive angle. I made the decision. I don't even know that it was a conscious decision, but my body just reacted, was assumed the position for ejection and pulled the cable between my legs. And a normal ejection is very violent. It will cause spinal compression because there's an instantaneous 50 G force as that rocket ignites under the seat. That eases to a sustained 12 to 14 G boost, which will compress your spine, knock the wind out of you, knock you unconscious. And guys, in a normal ejection, straight and level flight below 180 knots, will still get damaged spines, flail injuries from their arms at flailing around at that high speed air. I was way outside of the survivable envelope. I was, over 604 indicated knots airspeed, 695 miles per hour, which was 0.95 indicated Mach. So 95% the speed of sound at almost sea level. So just on the edge of extreme of I shouldn't have survived, but as I hit that airflow, it ripped my helmet off my head, traumatic brain injury, a broken C1 in my neck, left scapula shattered, both my upper arms shattered the humerus bones. The humerus in my right arm tore through my right brachial artery, causing rapid internal bleeding. My left forearm shattered my radius and ulna and severed the median nerve that controlled my left hand. The brachial plexus nerve group, which kind of controls your upper body, was smashed and damaged. The gear on my vest, I had ejected so fast, the gear just ripped off of my survival vest. The dry suit that I was wearing to protect me from that icy cold water, I ejected so fast, it just shredded that thing open. It was almost tearing the clothing off of my body, impacting the sound barrier with my body effectively. And my legs flailed around. The steel toe boots became like wrecking balls, smashing open my lower legs, causing open fractures in my tib fib and my lower legs, bleeding out of my lower legs now. And this all just happens in a couple seconds. When I pulled the ejection handle, I was 2 seconds from impact. They took a half a second ejection sequence to get out of the aircraft. So I had about 1.5 seconds to live by the time I had exited the aircraft. In that time, the aircraft plummeted into the ocean and just vaporized below me. Fortunately, the parachute opened enough to slow me so I didn't die in impact with the ocean. But very quickly, I plummeted into that ice cold ocean water. And then to make matters worse, that parachute that had just saved my life sunk underneath that ocean swell and current and started to drag me under. The Seawers, which are a saltwater activated explosive device designed to automatically disconnect the parachute, which is in a high-speed ejection, it's very common for pilots not to be able to manually disconnect the coke fittings because you have destroyed arms, which I absolutely did. But those Seawers failed the function. One of them fired, but it didn't disconnect. The other one didn't fire at all. So now I'm trapped onto this parachute that just saved my life, being drowned alive. And for anybody who's ever been held underwater when you need a breath of air and you can't get it, you know how terrible that feeling is. And it was just that for the next hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on which report I've read, of just being drowned alive. But I was, again, it was just miracle after miracle that kept me alive. Fortunately, my flight lead spotted my parachute opening, very quickly coordinated an on-scene rescue effort, got a fishing vessel over to my position. So there was at least some sort of visual reference point for my rough location. Because my beacon also failed, all my signaling equipment had ripped off my vest, my radio. Not that I would have been able to use that stuff anyways with my arms destroyed, but I was just a little dark head bobbing around out on there in the ocean. And had this fishing vessel not gotten over there from my flight lead's quick thinking, I would have just drifted off into the ocean and never be seen again.
Were you conscious, or were you in and out of a state of shock during this time? Do you remember a lot of it?
So I remember linearly up until that decision, or nearly the decision to eject, that the ocean rushing up at me and just being like, oh no. I remember up to that very clearly. From then on, I don't have a linear memory, but I've gotten over the years for a long time in the form of flashbacks and night terrors. I would get clips of being in the ocean and feeling that sense of dread and being drug under and inhaling the salt water and this fear of the shark that's going to eat me as I'm bleeding out, this absolute terror that kind of haunted me for a long time and messed with my sleep. But I don't have linear memory. I was in and out of consciousness, according to the rescuers and the fishermen and the people who showed up on scene. I was talking, I was yelling and screaming at times when I, would get up to the surface, but I was pretty out of it from shock and everything, and the brain injury. I was not fully there.
You're
Probably
one
for the
tough
better.
SOB, man. You are one tough SOB to survive that. And I'm just thinking, like, the fastest I've ever been in something, and that was like a race car, in a Las Vegas track, and it was probably got it up to about 160 miles per hour. And that was like really fast. I mean, gripping, right? And I could just only imagine 695 miles an hour being ejected out of an aircraft, and surviving that. That's just unbelievable, man. You are tough as fucking nails, man.
It was seriously miraculous.
Yeah.
I think I was fortunate. I'm a fairly short guy. I was a wrestler, so I had like a strong neck, I think, from keeping my head getting ripped off. And I had been doing a lot of weight training, and that kind of helped protect me.
Sure.
But it was a lot of miracles that came together. But I think the preparation was an important piece. Is when you're doing jobs like that, you need to be fit, you need to be capable, so you can handle injury.
God bless, man. I'm glad you're here, and I know your family is too.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable. So, all those injuries that you outlined earlier, we won't go over all them again, but just the wave tops of like how long you're in the hospital and kind of, details a little bit about that, the aftermath. Go ahead.
Yeah, so eventually they got me out with a Navy H-60 Seahawk helicopter. Rescue swimmer cut me loose of the paracord and got me back to a level 1 trauma center. And there they had to pump the water out of my lungs, multiple blood transfusions, treated me for kidney failure as rhabdo just kind of overwhelmed my internal organs from all that tissue breakdown. And once I was semi-stable, they rushed me into surgery, induced a coma, and I spent the next week undergoing over a dozen trauma surgeries as they performed fasciotomies on all 4 of my extremities to prevent amputation. They rebuilt my skeleton with titanium rods and steel plates and screws. So I've got like a legitimate Wolverine skeleton now out of the deal. And then I spent another week in a non-induced coma as everyone just wondered if I was going to come to. And eventually the lights came back on. And I remember some of my first memories where I thought everybody had tied me down in this bed. And it was like waking up from a dream, except for some
Mm.
reason I wasn't in my bedroom. I was in this loud beeping room with all these machines and wires, and my body was wrapped in plastic wrap, and I had hundreds of staples and sutures all over my arms and legs, and I couldn't move. And I thought they had tied me down on the bed, but it was because I was paralyzed. And eventually the
Wow.
medical staff came in and said, hey, you've been in a high-speed ejection. You're not going to be able to walk again. You're never going to be able to use your arms again, and your military flying career is over. And the first thing I could think was, fuck that. I'm going to prove you guys wrong. And so it became my mission every day to just do what I could. And for a long time, all that meant was I would like scoot my butt a little bit on the bed, maybe, but after about 3 months of inpatient rehabilitation at the Poly Trauma Center in Richmond, Virginia, I was able to get around on a walker like a little old lady. I was still pretty messed up, but I then spent the next 2 years, undergoing more surgeries, overcoming prescription drug addiction to all the meds they were giving me for pain management, from the gabapentin, oxycodone, oxycontin, tramadol, trazodone, amitriptyline, and then all the things to counter effect the side effects and all this crap. Eventually got off of that, had to go through a FNAB, or a Field Naval Aviator Evaluation Board, in order to gain my right to keep my wings after being in a mishap that just destroyed an $89 million Super Hornet. And fortunately was ruled favorably in that investigation. And then had to gain a whole stack of medical waivers. But after 2 years of all this, I was able to max out the Navy's physical fitness test again. I'd gotten all the waivers. I had passed my FNAB, and I went back to flying Super Hornets.
Wow.
And this is kind of like where the Disney happy ending version of the story would be. However, this was just the beginning of the real struggles that I started to face.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're getting there, and I know ultimately you were medically retired, and from what I gather from reading your story is that the mental aspects of your recovery really started to take a toll on you. The TBI
Mm-hmm.
and those things is why ultimately, it was best for you to depart, out the Navy. Go ahead and talk about that, please.
Yeah, so I was back. I felt like back on top of the world. I'd gotten back off the fire-breathing dragon that had bucked me off, and feeling good. And there were still little mental lapses that I noticed from the brain injury, but it was kind of small stuff, and I just figured it would go away with time. But I went on a flight down at Tyndall Air Force Base doing a live fire missile exercise and fighting a F-22 Raptor in what we call dissimilar air combat training, or BFM, another dogfight. And I came back from that flight, and I realized I remembered the fight with the Raptor vividly, but I had large memory lapses and confusion surrounding the missile shoot. And I just tried to shake it off over the next 2 days, but I couldn't fall asleep. I was suffering from insomnia. I was getting vertigo, memory lapses, confusion, like something wasn't right. And there had been a number of incidents in the F-18 community where the pressurization systems had been malfunctioning and causing rapid decompression sickness. And scuba divers, I'm sure, are familiar. If you come up from depth too quickly, the nitrogen in your blood can come out of solution and form bubbles. If you get those in your joints, it's the bends or type 1 DCS, but you can get those in your brain, and it blocks off blood flow, and it can give you effectively like a stroke or an aneurysm, where your brain is no longer getting blood where it needs it. And so they suspected that might be what had happened. They rushed me to a hyperbaric treatment facility. I spent the night at the dive base getting squeezed in the chamber. And the next day I felt a little bit better, but there was still something not right. So eventually, in that kind of world, as soon as you say something's wrong with your mind, like there goes your medical clearance, there goes your security clearance. And so there's a huge barrier to trying to seek help. But I had gotten to the point at this point now that I knew that there was something seriously wrong, and I could no longer safely operate an aircraft until I fixed it. And so with hopes that maybe we could get to the bottom of it and fix it, I reluctantly went into the flight surgeon and said, something's not right. I'm suffering. I can't sleep. My memory's messed up. Like I'm getting confused. I'm getting vertigo. And that very quickly got me a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis. And unfortunately, the real culprit was this underlying traumatic brain injury that I had from the ejection that had been exacerbated by the decompression sickness. And it caused chaos. The hardware in my brain was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the approach that was taken and is all too often taken in mainstream medicine and military medicine is, we're going to talk about your emotions. We're going to have you come in a clinical setting, and then we're going to give you pills. And next thing I knew, like, I was on more of this stuff, SSRIs, antipsychotic medication that was given to me so I could sleep at a low dose. And my life just started to spiral out of control because that underlying physiology of my brain was just getting exacerbated and getting worse. And meanwhile, they just kept throwing more pills at it, which it was just this cycle of insanity that eventually led to my medical retirement. I had become suicidal. I had gone into psychoses. You know, I could no longer distinguish between my imagination and reality. My wife had just had our brand new little baby boy, and she's now trying to take care of a baby and now a full-grown adult who, at times, I thought I was being hunted by the government. I was hiding from the windows. I would run into the kitchen when she was cooking dinner and dump the food in the garbage, screaming, "It's poisoned. We can't get it." And I was being poisoned, but it was in these FDA-approved capsules that they were giving me for my mental health stuff. And my life just spiraled out of control. Thank God for my wife. You know, I had become suicidal, and the only thing that stopped me from ending my own life one night with my Glock was my wife and my baby boy were asleep next to me, and I didn't want them to wake up to that.
Wow.
But
Hey,
you
thanks.
know, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And to the viewers, I'm on live stream right now with Kegan Gill, medically retired F-18 pilot who tragically ejected and sustained some serious injuries from an aircraft mishap. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. So Kegan, don't really want to start like a big pharma conversation per se. But I will tell you, I'm not a believer in just medicating people and that being the solution to everything.
That makes two of us.
They tried doing that shit to me, and I took it. And I know you're not supposed to do this neither, but I dumped them down the toilet because they really just made me feel even more awful than I already did. A lot of folks out there will defend it. Doctors will defend it. But ultimately, it's a personal decision. And you made a personal decision, you know, to take your treatment in another direction. So can you talk about what worked for you to get you to, you know, subside, you know, some of the injuries that you had and some of the real depression that you were going through?
Yeah, you know, I spent years struggling with mental health after that, being medically retired, you know, on the verge of divorce, really distant from my kids. I just become a different person. I was miserable and numb, and the only emotion that I seemed to feel was just anger and rage. I ended up living in an inpatient VA psych facility for about 40 days, where I saw the most abysmal treatment of American veterans that I think people could imagine. It was a prison. It was a prison situation. I consider myself a prisoner of the war on mental health that is going on in our country, both for civilians and the military folks and the veterans. It's abysmal. You're put into these facilities, and you're fed garbage food. You're confined. You're not getting good sleep. You're not getting nutrition, exercise, sunlight. You're not getting the foundations of healing. Instead, you're just getting pumped full of pharmaceuticals, and it's abysmal. And when I got out of that facility, luckily with the support of my family, um, I was just a broken person. But I knew I had to do something different. And I was very fortunate to stumble across psychedelic assisted therapy through the book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which is using psychedelics or indigenous medicines and theogens to heal from mental health issues and trauma. And I had a lot of both going on. And I eventually got access to psychedelic assisted therapy through an organization called Heroic Hearts Project, and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. I got involved with an entire community of other veterans, ranging from, you know, SEALs and MARSOC and Green Berets and just incredible human beings, other Marines and Rangers that had served their countries at the highest levels, who had been in combat, who had beaten their bodies up serving. And when they started to have struggles, they all had the same thing happen to them, which was they got a bunch of pills thrown at them and their lives fell apart because those pills don't treat the underlying condition. They mask it temporarily, maybe in some cases, but over time, it just gets worse. And all these folks had very similar stories. And I came to realize this is happening to guys all the time. This is the norm, and it's just not getting talked about. And so I was very fortunate to gain access to traumatic brain injury clinic, and they finally started to assess what was going on with the underlying physiology of my brain. And through an extensive blood analysis through labs, they were able to say, okay, these hormones are off and this part of your brain's not working, and here's what's off. And now let's give you customized nutraceutical supplementation to address that, along with some therapies that will help. I got access to hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which did wonders for me. I got access to transcranial magnetic stimulation. But again, all of this was done through the generosity of nonprofit organizations, because there's no way I could afford this stuff. And insurance doesn't cover any of the things that actually work to heal me. And in fact, the pharmaceutical industry is using its clout through our political systems and the FDA to make many of these modalities that were helpful to me and helpful to so many others illegal, because they're a threat to their business model. The business model is to keep you on a drug that keeps you sick for the rest of your life, and they make profit off of that. They don't make a profit if you get better. And so, I kind of got exposed to this dark underbelly of that industry. And I was fortunate to have my eyes opened and to get the help and to see the transformation. And now I feel blessed that I get to be here and talk to you about this. And I can articulate what I've been through, because I'd say the vast majority of people that have been through that system are no longer here to talk about it, or no longer have the ability to articulate what they've experienced. And so I want the world to know what it's really like. And I want the world to also know that the human spirit and the body and the brain can heal. And really, at the foundation of all this, the most important things I learned isn't all the expensive hyperbaric chambers and all of that. It's the foundation of your health. Is your sleep is the number one priority. So doing anything that affects your sleep negatively, that means cutting out alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, cannabis, getting yourself good nutrition through whole foods, not eating processed junk, drinking clean water, getting some regular form of exercise, even if that's just going for a walk in the morning and getting a little sunlight on your face, and reconnecting with community. It's very easy after we leave, especially when we're dealing with mental health, to cut ourselves off and isolate ourselves. And when you do that, you just start to fester and wither as a human being. We need that connection. We need that brotherhood that we had when we were in the military. And as soon as you stop doing that, it can put you in a dark place all on its own. But really, these foundational things that I could talk about all day with you, that's what brought me back, was rebuilding my lifestyle and habitual patterns that really made the difference. And while the psychedelics, I think, helped accelerate that process and open my eyes to it, and also created this sort of neuroregenerative effect, so much of the real healing just comes through the very basic foundations of your life. There's a great book out there called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. I highly recommend that. Another really good one out there right now is Good Energy by Dr. Kaylee and Cassie Means. They've been on a bunch of podcasts lately talking about it. But there's a lot that anybody can do, even if you don't have access to the nonprofits, and I think there's a fight now going on as well to try to bring access to these healing modalities to everybody. And so that's something I do now, along with motivational speaking and writing a book. I'm advocating for veteran mental health and mental health in general, so people can get access to this stuff, and you don't have to fly out of the country, the land of the free, to another country to get healing after serving your military honorably.
I respect it, brother. I really respect it. It's interesting that, spirit and tribe and, and health. And, for all the guys out there, I think something that I'm getting out of Kegan's story is that, there's a lot of guys out there that, can't put one foot in front of the other and can't get life going and moving themselves. I mean, here you are. And again, you're probably going to smack me because I'm pumping you up, but here you are, you go through this serious injury to the point where you have to rebuild your skeleton. Your injuries are that severe. You go to the depths of hell, with mental health, trying to figure it out. Your relationships are suffering. You're on the verge of, almost being a broken man by yourself, alone, with meds, with access to alcohol and anything that you want. But here you are now, going through this journey, never quitting, to being a man who has good relationships now with your family. You're taking your story and you're inspiring and motivating others. You're just doing the good things that good dudes friggin' do, and you're excelling at it. And that's just why I just got a lot of respect for you. So those my viewers out there, a lot of these are veterans. If you're watching this, please just understand that, that if Kegan can friggin' do it after the shit that he's been through, so can you.
Absolutely. And really the secret that I think I found through this process was just keeping that little ember of hope alive and feeding it. Even in the darkest moments, there's going to be a little spark of hope. And you might just think it's your imagination. You might think it's completely unrealistic, but instead of biting it off on all the darkness and obvious shit that you're dealing with, there's that what if I do get better? What if I can learn to walk again? What if I can get my arms back? What if I do get to come back into this hospital with my flight suit on and my wings on my chest and say, hey, I'm back flying fighter jets again. Can you believe it? Feeding that hope and optimism that is within all of us, even in the darkest situations. And then realize, I'm on the back end of all of this stuff now in a healthier place, but I am thankful that I went through all this hell, because it has given me the ability to be the person that I am now. And I wouldn't get to be the person I am now without those dark experiences.
Hands down.
So realize that the challenging situations that we go through in life are carving you. They're lessons. They're a gift to you in a way to make you the best version of yourself that you've ever been. But you have to feed that hope in the light, and choose the hope in the light, even in the dark, and feed that and add some tender to it and stoke it up. And before you know that little tiny spark is going to be a raging bonfire, and all that darkness you're not even going to be able to see because it's so damn bright and warm. There's a quote that I really love from Carl Jung, and it's, in order to grow to reach the heavens, we must have roots that have been deep into hell. And I think, the challenges we face and the darkness we go through allows us to grow even more as a human being, and then to share that gift on the other side of it and lift others up. And That's kind of where my mission's at now, is raising other people from that dark place that I was, to be that voice I wish I had when I was in the darkness, to hear, okay,
that's right,
there is a way forward. I don't have to just take these pills that make me miserable the rest of my life. And I'm not wrong to think this stuff is making me sicker, because it is. And so I hope this, even if it's just one person out here listening, I hope this touches you in a way that allows you to move forward in a positive direction and get your life back.
That's the secret sauce, brother, in my opinion, because when you give, your life, and you're part of that tribe, and then the tribe goes away once you depart your service. If you're not plugged back in and you're not giving back in some way, I think that defines, that will bring purpose to your mission post-military time. And it's really important. A lot of the guys that I see that suffer, they're out there in isolation, they're by themselves, they're not connected in, they're sort of just drowning in their own thoughts. And that's not where you want to be. So fellas, ladies, continue to try to find, that hope that Kegan talked about. And also just, giving back doesn't have to be on a national stage either. It can be just giving back in your own way to your community, to your brothers, to just a small group of friends. That can light that fire and make you feel really good about yourself and pull you up out of those bad thoughts.
Yeah, it could be as simple as sending a text message to your buddy.
Hands down.
Saying, hey, man, how you been?
Yeah.
And it feeds and it snowballs and it builds. And re-getting that purpose, rebuilding that community, those are crucial, along with rebuilding that foundation of health with sleep, nutrition, hydration, exercise, nature, connection to the outdoors. All this stuff together is pretty basic, really. It's all the stuff maybe our grandmas used to tell us. The most important things in life when we weren't listening. But it's the secret sauce.
Everybody out there has something that makes them happy. So, pursue it, and be consistent with it, and have a good time with it. All right, man. Last thing I wanted to kind of ask you before we start closing down shop and give you the opportunity for the floor would be, today, you do have some LLCs, you're traveling the country, sharing your story, the dynamic with your family. Can you sort of kind of tie up like what you're doing now what you're intending to do, how's things with your family, like how are you feeling? Just take a couple minutes and go ahead and walk through that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a miraculous transformation, and it hasn't always been linear. It's been a roller coaster at
Yeah,
times. Even after gaining access to some of these alternative modalities, it's still a lot of work you got to put in over years. Um, but I've got my family back. I've got I feel so lucky to get to be a dad, and my kids just light up when they see me because I'm dad again. I'm back. I'm that positive, upbeat, fun guy to be around, not this broken dude that I was for a while that would tell them to leave me alone anytime they approached me.
sure.
Rebuilt my relationship with my wife. She's been through a lot of hell with all of this, holding on for our family. But I'm blessed because we're still a family, and we're growing forward. Um, Professionally, I've been motivational speaking now for the past 2.5 years, traveling all over the country, speaking at everything from nonprofit fundraisers, corporate events, mastermind retreats, universities, high school commencement ceremonies, you name it, and everything in between. And sharing this message of hope and inspiration that I hope touches folks. I wrote a book. It's called Phoenix Revival, The
Yeah.
Aftermath of Naval Aviation's Fastest Survived Ejection. You can get that on Amazon. It's hardcover, paperback, ebook, and on Audible. Um, in addition to that, I've been working in the space of psychedelic assisted therapy and helping other people going through their journeys. Um, and I'm a meditation coach of all things,
Hmm.
teaching other people how to meditate, which, if you get access to some of the psychedelic assisted therapy, it really opens you up to this world of meditation that in itself is a powerful healing tool for the nervous system to calm you down and put you in the present moment and to slow all those racing thoughts that can so easily take us out of control. And we're just stuck in that fight or flight mode all the time from being in the military and just being on edge, pounding coffee and got a big dip in and all the terrible shit we do to ourselves when we're in the military. And it helps kind of deactivate that and recalibrate and puts you back in touch with the calmness inside you. But yeah, that's just a little bit about it. If you'd like to learn more about me, check out my website, kegangill.com. You can put my name into whatever podcast platform you like, and you'll probably find a bunch of options. And please check out my book. There's a lot more to the story we didn't get to get into today, but thank you so much for what you're doing, Mark, to help share messages like this. I think we're in an outstanding time in human history because of these kinds of podcasts that are getting the truth out to people in a way that they need. I don't think the veterans of the past had this kind of outlet to talk
No.
about this stuff. And so many guys just struggled in silence.
Yeah. I think the other part of it is, we're in very politicized times, of course. And I think this is a good break, to get people, a little bit more grounded and tune into something else besides, this divide.
Yeah. Yeah. You just got to turn that off, man.
Yeah.
That's
It's
not
hard
serving
to,
anybody.
it's hard to like, I hear it all the time. Like, hey, did you hear about, no, I didn't hear about it. Cause I try to keep myself busy doing, productive and positive things rather than just get, wrapped up in those things. But
stoking the fear and the anger.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aware enough, to cast a vote and to have some mild views, but I'm not so married to my opinions that I want to just hate people.
Yeah, that's good. That's a healthy place to be.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, my respect, to you and to your family. And I think one of the things that I've gained from having you on is also just a newfound respect for pilots. Being a ground combat guy, a lot of times we don't give the air side, the credence and the respect that they do. But when you're a ground troop, and you need air support and they deliver precision fires, to a target and they save your ass, like you just go through the roof, your respect and your admiration for pilots. You're like, oh my God, I love the air wing. God, I love pilots so much. That actually happened to me on a couple of occasions, in Iraq. But then also just the amount of skill and just the pressure. The ground dudes think all the pressure is, closing with punishing and killing the enemy through, close, combat and quarters and mount training and all that stuff. But what you guys do is equally as challenging, if not more, in my opinion. So I really appreciate you providing insight to that side that often we don't really pay much attention to.
And likewise, for for the pilot community in naval strike fighter aviation, it's the highlight of any pilot's career when they get the opportunity to come help the guys on the ground in a CAS scenario. That's what we live for, is the opportunity to save and help out in those kind of situations. And so know that the respect is mutual for what you guys do, because being down there in the ground in the firefights with bullets whizzing over your head and explosions like that is the level of courage that's got to take is mind-boggling to me. So thank you for what you served 28 years of doing that. And I can't imagine the grind that must have been, and the challenging situations you must have faced through that.
Yeah, man, we'll get to that on future podcasts. That's why you and I are great partners, ground to air, just closing with and delivering, precision fire and doing it's great, man. I appreciate you, Kegan. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the program. And I wish you all the best, and please keep in touch. Parting shots over to you, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope this touches somebody out there that needs it. And thanks for helping get the message out, Mark. Really appreciate it.
We'll get this thing distributed out on YouTube and continue, promoting your story. And I promise you it'll help people. Okay.